This is an ultimate global podcast. Hello, and welcome to our special weekly podcast on trending international and social affairs. You're listening to Saurabh Kaura and George Mavros from Sydney.
Well, welcome again to another exciting series of episodes. And this one is pretty special because we're covering it as a part of personal growth and networking, but I think it's pretty relevant across job professions and in many roles that people want to apply mindfulness in. So today's topic, applying mindfulness in business, and we are discussing that with Jude Martin. I've had a very, not that long connection with Jude, but very short and a very fruitful connection with Jude is what I would say. And I'm sure it's going to be a long-lasting connection because Jude has had a tremendous effect on the lives of us here at LMS365 as well, because he gave us a really good session for our company team. And so I thought of inviting him to the podcast that George and I run together so that he can share the message of mindfulness with others as well. And then we can also share that with our networks when we put it out on LinkedIn or any other platform. So welcome to the episode, Jude. Do you want to introduce yourself to the listeners on what you do?
Thank you, Saurabh, and thank you, George, for having me. I feel really humbled to be asked to join this podcast and this conversation. My name is Jude. I'm a mindfulness coach. My background is in organizational development. That's my background. And I worked in organizational development for the past 15 plus years. Prior to that, I lived as a monk. So when I was about at 19, I decided to become a monk. And I lived in silence for about 7 years, in silence and meditation. And that really transformed just my take on reality, my take on things. And so that really, and I can go into that a bit more further later on in the conversation, but my point of departure from the way that I do organizational development, or the way that I did organizational development, was really a mindfulness-driven approach. Yeah. So the other things I do is that I'm also a lecturer. So I'm a lecturer at Macquarie University in business communications, and also at Notre Dame as well, doing my PhD. I'm in my final year of my PhD in Notre Dame. And the topic of my PhD is on emotional intelligence, deep self-awareness, of which mindfulness is a key part, a fundamental part, and transformational leadership. So that, in summary, is a bit about my background, Saurabh.
That's incredible, Jude. Well, I know you pretty well, but thanks for introducing yourself to the audience here as well, who might be listening to this episode later on. Now, we want to dig a bit deeper into this topic of mindfulness. When you talk about mindfulness in business, what do you exactly mean in terms of a team member applying mindfulness, or a CEO applying mindfulness, or any kind of role, job description applying mindfulness in their own roles?
Yes.
How would you define mindfulness, first of all, in general, and then maybe we can talk about specifics later on?
Yes. Okay. So thank you for that question. I like there's a definition on mindfulness that is given by Jon Kabat-Zinn. Jon Kabat-Zinn is regarded as the father of mindfulness. And Jon Kabat-Zinn, and I'm just going to go by his definition, and then from there, I'll give you my own take on that, which I think really applies to business. But Jon Kabat-Zinn defines mindfulness as awareness that arises through paying attention. Yes, paying attention on purpose, in the present moment, non-judgmentally. So paying attention in the present moment, non-judgmentally. And what does all of that mean? What it means to me, so in terms of what is mindfulness from a personal perspective, simply put, mindfulness is about paying attention. And why is that so important? It's so important because most of the time, and there's research around this, in the workplace, we are thrown so many things at any given time that in actual fact, we're not really able to focus. And so mindfulness gives us the skill to be able to focus and pay attention on one thing, but with our whole being. And so that in turn has a positive impact on things like focus, on flow, and flow is a component of peak performance, right? So flow, meaning that we're able to peak perform in whatever we pay attention on moment to moment.
Absolutely. And I think that's so relevant across so many job roles and descriptions that I just talked about before as well, that if you are kind of mindful of the way you interact with others, not only professionally, but also in your personal life, because somehow I feel that you kind of reflect what you bring from your personal life to the
Yes.
workplace as well. And I think this is something which, George, you might have witnessed as well around you through your experiences. Do you have any comments on mindfulness as how it is being described by Jude?
Yeah, I'm I'm very comfortable with Jude's explanation. What I'd like you to explain to the people listening, Jude,
Yes.
is you said it's without being judgmental. So does that mean if I've done something right or I've done something wrong, I'm not supposed to judge it? Or what does judgmental mean when we're talking to people about mindfulness?
Yes. Yes. Very good question. Very pertinent question. So judgmental means mainly from the perspective of self-judgment. We are the harshest critics on ourselves. We are the harshest critics. And so the superego sometimes goes off. That's the voice in the head that we hear. It's a regular thing. It's that stream, almost like a constant stream. And so when we speak about non-judgment, what we are really referring to is the capability to be able to listen to that stream, because it's going on. It's always going. It's always playing, and it's okay that it plays. It's part of our mind. So being able to listen to that stream and not allow that judgment that we hear to impact how I then relate with myself, but how I relate with you, non-judgmentally.
So
Does that make
one
sense?
of the things, one of the things I talked to Sarab about is if you're not failing, you're not trying enough. And another one is I hate critics. I can't tolerate critics, but I love critiques. And to me, the difference between a critique and a critic, the critic wants to tell you what you did wrong and what you could have done and the critique is coming from a space of the heart and caring. And let's have a look at that and what can we do better? And so when Jude's talking about in a non-judgmental, it's about us looking at something for what it is, not for what it makes us. It's about what it is, and so I quite like you. I quite like your terminology for it, because
And
a
I
lot
love
of
the
people
way.
think.
No, go on, George, please.
A lot of people think that, oh well, if you say something about something or about somebody to them, you're being judgmental. No, if you're raising that point in a derogatory or a negative or a non-helpful, non-critiquing way, that's judgmental. So anybody listening to this, we want you to judge the situation. We want you to make a ruling and a calling on it, but do it with looking at it for what it is.
Yes. Yes.
And maybe, Jude, you might want to tell us a bit more about the benefits of mindfulness. So you have described what is mindfulness. Some of them might be thinking, all right, so that's a really good definition. Now, if we start applying mindfulness in our businesses, what are the direct benefits that any team or any company can have out of that?
Yeah. So my response to that is this: apart from the benefits that are obvious, the mindfulness has been around for a while. People at some point or the other have dabbled into mindfulness. We're not talking about something new, but what we are talking about is the application of it. The application of it is where the newness comes. So what I find typically in organizations, and I've worked in organizations for a while, as you have, is that during times of turbulence, during COVID, when COVID came, and organizations had to respond to the well-being calls of its employees, right? Organizations had to, it's almost as if organizations had to find out how to do mindfulness, because people were calling out for it. It's because people know what people already know about mindfulness. The newness, if there's such a term, what I mean by newness, I mean the simplicity that I'm trying to communicate here is being able to pick up some very simple tools and know how to apply them in the moment. That's the difference. We know about it theoretically, it seems, but experientially. Now, let me respond to your question, because I really like the way George was responding to the last question, and he says mindfulness is about being able to see things for what it is. Well, once we are able to apply those simple tools of mindfulness, and I can give some examples of them, even right now as I'm speaking to you. For example, as I'm speaking to you right here, my legs are crossed and I'm feeling the soles of my feet. So I'm connected as best I can with my body here, because it gives me stability. And stability makes me feel calmer. It makes me be aware of my breathing. So it enables me to give you my fullest attention. That's one of the benefits of mindfulness. But let me add something else. And this is leveraging George's point. George says, define mindfulness as being able to see something for what it is. And I think that's really pertinent. One of the benefits of mindfulness in organizations is being able to see something for what it is, not having a colored view with all the interpretations and dozens of biases and people that work around, being able to see and cut through stuff and be able to see something for what it is. But you can only do that when you can adopt a very dispassionate view. You can stand back, you can look at your judgment, you can not become the critique, the critic, as Joel said, but you can see the critique from a non-judgmental point of view. All of a sudden you see things so differently. And that's a bit of a roundabout way of saying it.
What I was attempting to say was, there's a guy, I think his name's John Kabat something, John Kabat-Zinn.
John Kabat-Zinn, yes.
And I think he was the one that actually founded, call it what you will, back in the 70s or the 80s. And he actually came up with this stress reduction program through mindfulness. And
that's correct.
So I think it's probably been around before that, but from my readings and that, he was one of the guys that sort of, from my interpretation of a lot of his stuff, was where I get the idea of, you look at it for just what it is, and try and remove the emotion from it.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right. John Kabat-Zinn. You
say it a lot better than
me. John Kabat-Zinn, that's his name. Listen, it's in my agenda to know this, so I should know it. Yeah. But John Kabat-Zinn, you're absolutely right, George. He basically took Eastern mindfulness and Westernized it. That's basically what he did, and then used research, applied research to it, and demonstrated that being mindful, those simple practical steps of watching your breathing, watching the steps that you make, literally paying attention to your feet as you move from one step to the other, sitting and just being aware of everything that's around you without thinking about it. So you're not thinking about it, you're just aware of it.
Yeah.
He took all of those simple tools and through his research created the mindfulness-based stress reduction program, which again is research to back up how mindfulness is a proven tool for better managing anxiety and stress, which is obviously one of those benefits as well, Sarab, to our businesses, because our businesses sometimes can be very stressful. The work that we do at work can be very stressful, and being able to know how to manage those. Stress is part of life, right? It's a reality of our environment in the workplace, but it calls for greater focus in terms of using tools that you can leverage stress to actually boost their performance. Leverage it. And that's what mindfulness does.
One of the interesting things, Sarab, about mindfulness is there are some practitioners of psychology in that actually say that mindfulness can actually increase stress and it can increase negative emotions. Now, I guess that's true, but if you want to look at yourself in the mirror, you can look at yourself in the mirror and gain the positives, or you can look at yourself in the mirror and say, "Oh, look at all the negatives." So I personally accept that is a possibility of mindfulness, but I don't necessarily say, "Oh, you've become negative because you're practicing mindfulness." No, you were probably negative. It's just you've chosen glass half full, glass half empty. I'm mindful of the glass. Jude and I see that as being half full, and that's positive. And somebody else says, "Oh gosh, now the glass is." I've noticed now it's only half full. So mindfulness itself.
Well, you can always turn it around and say it's half full of water, half full of air. And that's what I was talking to somebody a few days ago. I said it's half full of water. It's still half full of air. You didn't see that. So that's another way of looking into the same thing.
That is why you impressed me, young man. That's a very good approach.
I was also going to say, just to add to that, George, that seeing the glass half full is more of a mindset. It's more of a mindset than a mindful way of looking at that. So the mindset is a state of mind, call it a program, a mental program that people tend to unconsciously operate from because they've not been able to, because they're not aware of it yet. And mindfulness and the tools of mindfulness enable people at work and employees to become aware of the mindset that makes them see a glass half empty all the time, as opposed to seeing it half full.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
That's what I'm agreeing with you in that principle. That
yes,
the critiques or the critics of mindfulness, I think, confuse one with the other.
Yes.
It's one thing to observe it. You then choose if you've got the right mindset, you can do something with that. If you've got the wrong mindset, you can crawl up in a ball and worry about life.
Yes.
Well, one of the direct questions, Jude, for you, which I'm sure a lot of the CEOs and founders watching this episode might want to know from you is, what's the ROI in for me? You're talking about very theoretical stuff. You're talking about these benefits. Does it also reflect in the ROI of our financial statements? I'm not particularly a believer of that, and linking mindfulness with that. But there can be people who want to know the direct benefits of mindfulness and how does it translate into tangible results for the team, which I'm sure you would be addressing to a lot of companies. So, what's your take on that, Jude?
Okay, thanks for that question, Sarab. I think it's a really good question. I'll come to the tangible benefits at the second part of the question. But I guess my immediate response to that question is this: it's from personal experience. So I was doing research as part of my PhD program into mindfulness and emotion, and I came across a piece of research which was really compelling, and it really responds to your question. And the research looked at leadership globally. It looked at leadership profiles, and looked at the qualities of the qualities that leaders should have when it comes to managing their companies. And the research showed that the biggest quality of leadership, certainly in this century, is, and this is a quote, is the management of emotion. The management of emotion. And it goes further to say that leaders should manage emotion akin to how the financial markets are managed. And the reason why it says that is you just need to look at it. We are working in organizations with people, and people aren't just people are a combination, I often say, of the physical, the mental, the emotional, and dare I say, the spiritual. All comes together. And so in business, we aren't just managing balance sheets. We're managing everything that drives a healthy balance sheet. And that includes a person's mental ability, their emotional ability, their physical ability, and their spiritual ability. All of that come together, and you might want to call that the human capital of an organization that then drives performance. So I think for any CEO who is listening to this, I think the key message here, and most CEOs, most organizations get this, they understand this. So this is not new, but I think the critical part, the key part, is seeing mindfulness, seeing investing in programs, simple programs for mindfulness for their staff, for their managers, for leaders, seeing that as actually a tool through which they can harness the capabilities of their people, cutting across those four areas: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And that has an impact on the bottom line.
Yeah, and I think that's very well described, Jude. The way you have described that the whole of the body and the mind, when body, mind, and soul, they're healthy. At the end of the day, that's when you kind of start delivering the best of you as a person at work, and that kind of drives the entire performance, not only of the team, but also the entire organization. And that's when the results kind of start picking up.
That's right. That's right. That's right. I was going to say, sorry to interrupt you there. You mentioned performance. Dare I say peak performance? Because peak performance comes from flow. And flow is when the whole entire being is being used, as opposed to just mental. Mental is more around high task management, which is about tick boxes and big tasks. A peak performance is more about using your entire being, managers using their entire being to lead. And that's a new type and kind of leadership, I think, for the 21st century. Bearing in mind what's gone on, the post-COVID era that we're living in, where the management of emotion has become even more critical, I think.
Yep. Are you going more towards the servant leadership now?
Why not? Everything is. There's no real distinction. Servant leadership model combined with transformational model, combined with the emotionally intelligent model. I think they all come together.
Sorry, what were you saying, George?
I was just going to say, when it comes to leadership, there's a very, very big hint that leaders should pick up on, because when we talk to management and we talk to, and managers can be different to leaders, but management, leadership people, we talk to them about being mindful of the bottom line, being mindful of their staff. The hint to everybody should be the words that we used about being mindful about different aspects. And one of the things about being mindful about what you're doing is more about not trying to do 10 things at once and rushing through. It's about taking the time and thinking about, this is what you may have 10 challenges. We understand that. But being mindful of the different responsibilities you've got, you then start to actually think about your staff. You think about your clients. You think about this. So change think to being mindful of your staff, whilst at the same time being mindful of your own personal requirements, whilst at the same time being mindful of this. Now, if you do 5 or 6 things at a steady pace, you've got a lot more chance of succeeding than if you try to do 10 things as fast as you can all at the one time. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. So leadership and mindfulness, is it important? Heck yeah. Heck yeah.
I was just going to add something to what George said. I love the way you phrased that, George, and I'll add to that as well that being mindful when you're making those decisions that you've mentioned, one of the key benefits is that it enables you to step out of autopilot. Because more often than not, we do things without even thinking about them. We're actually doing stuff, but we're not there. And working in autopilot mode has been shown to actually be the cause of stress. When we're not aware of what's going on, we enter into that autopilot mode. So yes, it is about that, and it's also about having those simple tools to step out of operating in autopilot.
Yeah. And another thing that I've taught Sarab about, is that when emotion comes into a conversation, the first person to leave is logic. And so if you're in mindfulness mode, you are less likely to make emotional decisions. Because you give yourself the time to be observant of what's going on, you give yourself the time of being able to look at it without being in it.
Well, thank you so much, George, and thank you so much, Jude, as well. As much as we're talking about mindfulness in business, I'm also mindful of our time, and we know that we have got something after this. So we will wrap up this episode, and I'm sure we can do another episode with you, Jude, as a series of another mindfulness session.
I would love to.
As you know, we receive feedback from anybody on LinkedIn. So thank you so much for that. And I hope to see you again on another special series of episodes on mindfulness.
Thank you, Sarab. Thank you, George.
This is an Ultimate Global Podcast. Hello, and welcome to our special weekly podcast on trending international and social affairs. You're listening to Saurabh Kaura and George Mavros from Sydney.